Hi folks, welcome to episode 14 of the DPF Doctor TV. It's our weekly roundup of what's been happening here at the DPF Doctor Network. My name's Darren Darling. I was the founder member of the DPF Doctor Network. We're made up of currently over 50 independent workshops throughout the UK, all diagnostic specialists that can take care of all your DPF problems, diagnose the fault and repair them correctly. So that's a little bit about me for anybody that doesn't know us. You know, I'm also head of training and technical support here at the DPF Doctor Network. So what's been happening this week at the network? I've been on travels again, out speaking to some real great people, always looking to speak to enthusiastic, forward-thinking garages throughout the UK. So I've been on my travels a bit. Some interesting people that hopefully will see join our growing network in the fairly near future, you know. So it's been a good week. Something that I've been blown away with in recent weeks, and it's continued this week, is the amount of contact we've had from overseas. So that's something for people that are, you know, watching, looking in from further afield from other countries. We've been starting to get inquiries from around the globe for us to deliver training relating to DPF fault finding, etc. So that's something that we're working on. It does take a bit of putting together, so writing some new training at the moment that we'll be aiming to deliver in other countries moving into next year. So keep an eye on future sort of episodes and announcements on our page, because once we're ready, we'll be announcing the details of that, where we can come to various different countries and deliver our training. So that's something to keep your eye open for. But the interest in that, on the back of us being in Frankfurt recently, has been massive. So you know, quite flattered that people are sort of approaching us from, you know, in some cases the other side of the world. So we are working on it. I'll get something put together and we'll announce that fairly soon. So watch this space. Right, questions. One thing that's cropped up this week, and it crops up now and again, is where people are, you know, they've had a DPF cleaned and it hasn't lasted. So one gentleman I spoke to this week, he was quite distraught because he spent money cleaning a DPF filter, and he says it wasn't successful because it blocked again. Now, that's not strictly true, and this is what we always try and preach here at the DPF Doctor Network, is it's not the clean that failed. It's a fact that, you know, it's quite easy to clean a DPF. You must use, obviously, a good quality product. There's plenty of them out there. We choose JLM because it's our trusted brand. But the key to it is fixing the underlying faults, and it's not always obvious. A good example of that will be in our own workshop this week, a vehicle that was presented to us, a Ford Cougar, with no fault codes relating to DPF, but the customer has been having continual DPF problems with the vehicle, and you know what we've done is, through our assessment, we identified a sensor that hadn't failed, but it was not reading correctly. So in that case, cleaning the DPF on its own would not have been a long-term fix. It would be a very short-term fix. You know, another one we posted a video of a few days previously, back end of last week, was a Mitsubishi Lancer. Came in the same. DPF had been cleaned, no problems there. The DPF was nice and clean when it was presented to us, so it hadn't re-blocked again or anything like that. But it just come to us after having that done very recently, and again, warning lights were on, but you know, it was because sensors were misreading rather than being failed and thrown a fault code. So the key to success is identifying things that aren't always obvious. On some days it's very easy, other days it's not, but it's important that you understand how things should be working and what's good, so you can identify what's bad or not good. So that's the key to success. So it wasn't entirely correct, you know, someone being disappointed that they'd had it cleaned and it hadn't worked. It was more that they hadn't, the workshop that sent the DPF off for cleaning hadn't identified the underlying problem. So we'll get a look at that and we'll see what's going on with it. So it's important to look past the DPF problem and stop blaming the DPF and seeing why it's failed in the first place. So that's something we can always help with anyway. So just thought I'd reiterate that this week, because you know they felt that it was the clean that you know had failed, and clearly it hadn't. It's just the procedure that wasn't right, you know. So plenty of good companies out there. It's not just us that specialise in it. We get on well with, you know, some of our competitors that are professional, and there's some good guys. As long as they're diagnosing the problem, that is the key to success. Nail your problem first, then clean your DPF, and your success rate will massively improve, you know. Another thing that keeps cropping up, and we've covered this in previous episodes as well. I can't remember which episode number it was. It was going back to episode 3 or 4, where we cut open a DPF that had melted. And that was because of overdosing it with in-tank additives. I can't stress enough how important that is. We're still seeing this. If you go to buy an in-tank additive, there's nothing wrong with doing this, but don't overdose it. Because of the nature of how some of them work, personally in our workshop we use in-tank additives that lower the burn temperature, so it'll burn off the suit at a much lower temperature. But other additives out there, there's 2 ways you can do it, and some of them will create temperature and rely on the temperature to burn the suit off the DPF, which is in effect what happens during regeneration. Exhaust temperatures are raised, and it relies on the temperature in there to burn the suit off, which is fine. But if you start overdosing it, we're still seeing people coming in that have put, you know, 2 or 3 bottles of an additive in. You know, they've maybe put one in and it hasn't worked, so they've added another one and another one, and by the time, you know, the car comes to us, you know, there's damage on the DPF. The other scenario is you may well have the vehicle repaired. If you've got a sensor fault, or even if the DPF is blocked, the vehicle won't be trying to regenerate when them faults are there. So you may get away with adding extra additives. You then repair the car and you take it out of limp mode. The car does a regeneration, which increases exhaust temps, and you've overdosed the additives in the tank. Then it's just going to create a problem, and you know, unfortunately we're seeing this too often. Luckily, in some cases, you know, it is a question we ask people in the comment in our workshops: have you used any additives? How much have you put in? And if we know it's, you know, been overdosed, we will either drain the fuel off and refuel it, or if the fuel level's reasonably low, you know, it's sometimes sufficient to go and fill the tank up. But I can't stress enough how important that is, to put the correct amount of additives in, because you know, once that there's thermal damage on that DPF, then we can't repair it, and you're back in the position of needing to replace it, you know. So in the grand scheme of things, we're, you know, it's a reasonably small percentage, but we're starting to see it regularly now, which by all means, we've covered this in other episodes. If your DPF light's on, nothing wrong with going to a, you know, Motor Factors or wherever and buying some DPF regenerator. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But read the instructions. If it says put this bottle into 60 litres of fuel, that's really important. Make sure you've got a full tank of fuel. And they'll quite often state on there, do not use with less than maybe 30 litres. So read them instructions and put the correct amount in. Don't go putting 2 or 3 bottles in there, because it really can cause you huge problems. The other side of things, if it's hot enough to melt that DPF, it's also a fire risk as well. So, so use them, but use them correctly. If you're not sure and you want any advice, we're quite happy to, you know, advise people if they give us a call and ask what our thoughts are. We'll just, you know, always advise you. We're not against any products out there or additives. It's just that they must be used correctly, especially when you've got an excessive soot loading in the DPF. You know, using them under normal conditions where there's not, you know, the vehicle's been regenerating, and you may have been doing a bit of town driving, is completely different to you've had a high soot loading in there, and the DPF's already getting hot when when it's during regeneration, and then the additive just creates an over temperature problem, you know. So just be wary of them and use them correctly, you know. So that's it on questions this week. As usual, if you've got anything you would like to answer or address or anything like that, drop us a message, and we'll see if we can include it in next week. So that's been episode 14. So thanks for watching. We'll be back here next week, and we look forward to seeing you for episode 15. So cheers now. Thanks for watching.